to, I guess, something that most people are most afraid about, Jack, is the secondary, right? So I guess the pervasive thinking from the 49er fans, a lot of the analysts, a lot of the people that give their opinions on, the 49ers, the secondary is the biggest question mark. A lot of that has to do with depth. A lot of that is just because there's rookies backing up, Verrett and Mosley. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing out of the secondary now that pads are on? What is your overall sense of that?
The secondary on Friday when Emmanuel Mosley came back looked like they were for real all of a sudden. I think part of the problem in the secondary to this point is that they haven't really been giving the rookies much chance in with the ones. It's pretty much been guys like Ken Webster and the one player that they cut a few weeks earlier in the week, Tim Harris Jr. who was I think on injury reserve now. Those have been the guys that have been running with the opposite of Jason Verrett. So Verrett's been fine, and the only really weak spot in the secondary was that other cornerback position. So now that Mosley's been back, when Mosley's in there, you're seeing a defensive secondary that plays really well. We saw that early on Friday. It was the second play of team period. They decided to go right after Emmanuel Mosley, and Garoppolo was a little late with the ball and didn't really get enough on it, and he broke up a pass that, if that had been Harris or Webster, is likely a completion, because that's what we had seen throughout camp to that point, where he was able to, show Mosley looked just like the Mosley that we've seen throughout his career, where he drove on the ball, got his right hand out in front of it, knocked the ball down, and it was an incompletion. So I think that group is going to continue to grow. I think we're going to see those rookies start to get more and more run as the training camp goes through and the preseason games start. So the secondary, I'm optimistic about what we're going to see there. The other one too, I do want to make sure I point out Tavon Wilson has been playing strong safety with Jaquiski Tartt out. Mm-hmm. He's the one that's been running with the ones that he's done a really good job as well. D'Amico Ryan had really high praise for him yesterday during the session with the media when he was asked about him.
So obviously one of my favorite rookies that the 49ers brought in is Ambry Thomas. I'm definitely going to ask you about him in a second, but I want to kind of focus in more on just the starting secondary, right? So one of the things that D'Amico Ryan has said is that they're going to play a more aggressive style of defense. That's going to leave the corners playing a lot of press man, which we saw later in the season, even under Salah. But are you seeing those type of looks from the 49ers defense? Are we seeing a guy like Mosley and Verrett kind of on an island by themselves? Or are we also seeing more of like the zone that we're used to with the 49ers?
Well, they're mixing it up, and it really depends on what they're working on that day. So it seemed like on Friday they were really working on their pressure packages at times. So at that point they're in more man coverage, but they've looked like they're mixing it up pretty good. There's definitely a mixture of the two, and I'd say there's maybe a little bit more of an aggressiveness out of the corners this year than what we've seen in the past.
Now, another big question mark is K'Waun, right, with his health. Has he been out there, and if so, what are we seeing out of him?
Yeah, he's been out there, and he looks like same K'Waun that's always been out there. So far so good with him, and he's been taking almost all the reps at the corner at the slot position.
Awesome. And now let's ask, man. So one of the biggest, critiques on the 49ers secondary is the depth, right? Because most of the backups are rookies, obviously, namely Ambry Thomas and Lenoir. My boy Ambry was getting it when it was like no pads. And then all of a sudden the pads came on and he started, showing out. And, I know you said some great things about him. Grant has said some great things about him. But can you give us a little more in-depth out of what you're seeing out of Ambry? I know he might not be like taking that position from Mosley because Mosley's playing well. But what are we seeing out of Ambry? And can you project a little bit about how you feel like he'll do in his rookie season?
Well, Thomas on I think it was Friday, they finally had a one-on-one period between the corners and the wide receivers. And Thomas did really well. So did both of them. Thomas and Lenoir both really showed well in those drills. Thomas did a really good job. He went up man to man on Debo Samuel on one, totally locked him up. He took him out of it. And then on his other rep, he was up against Juwan Jennings, and he took him out too. So you just really tight man coverage, just really sticky. He's just right there all the time. So in that situation, he definitely shows that ability, and he's shown it off on Friday. And same with Lenoir. He's looked really good too. He had two matchups. He went up against Richie James Jr. He won that battle, and then the other one was up against Brandon Ayuk. And Ayuk is a guy that all of us are expecting to be a number one type receiver, and he was right there with him. It was really tight coverage, and it had to be a perfectly thrown ball to the sideline in order to get it to him. And that was the only reason he got beat. But you can't really fault the coverage on that one. So they both looked really good on Friday.
So let's give some way early predictions, Jack. So obviously the defense, if you look at the defense, right? Defensive line, linebackers, safeties. These are all places where most people are like, we have stars on each of these levels. And we feel like as long as these guys are healthy, even if maybe some of them go down, we'll have strengths there. The secondary is the biggest question mark. So the 49er fans that are just miserable and thinking that this secondary is going to be terrible, give us the case why this secondary is actually not going to be a weakness for us and going to play their part, hold their weight in the defensive scheme.
Well, I think they're deeper than we think. I think the more Ambry Thomas, again, it goes back to those rookies. The more Ambry Thomas and Deommodore Lenoir develop throughout the course of training camp, the deeper this defense is going to look. And we might not even see that until the regular season starts, right? Because those guys shouldn't even be on the field realistically. Mosley and Verrett should be able to hold down those spots. But those guys are guys that are coming along. And there was definite growth between week 1 and week 2, and I think we're going to see that again, in week 3. Just getting out there and playing at the NFL level, really understanding everything about it. You can see the 49ers bringing everybody along slowly, and those two are they're no exception to that. So I think, they're deep in the corners. Both those rookies are going to be better than people might think. At the safety positions, they have Tavon Wilson who's back there, and he's doing a good job as the starter at this point. Is Jaquiski Tartt ever going to show up in practice? Who knows? He hasn't been healthy since he got that turf toe injury against Green Bay last year, and he's a guy who really can't be counted upon, to play. He's a very good player when he's healthy, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy. So, that secondary spot, that's most likely going to be Wilson, and he looks pretty good. Even the other rookie, Hufanga's looked really, he's shown some things in camp as well, especially when they put him up around the box and his ability to play up there. It's not a surprise because that's where he always looked best in college as well when he played up close. So I think they have a lot of different pieces that they can play around with, and they're just kind of getting used to fitting those guys in. And we're probably not even going to see how they all fit together until week 1, because I'm pretty sure when we go out and on Saturday, it's going to be pretty vanilla and bland as far as what they're doing out there.
Right. And K Stunna Fillmore, TBA 2022, man. I have no idea what that name means, but I love I think that might be Japanese in the front, brother. But deeper than deep is kind of what we're talking about. And I'm glad you brought up Hufanga. I also want you to maybe talk a little bit about Marcel Harris. Are we seeing these guys actually practice as safeties, or are these guys kind of being a hybrid with the linebackers as well?
Well, Marcel Harris, he's not in the secondary at all. He's 100% with the linebackers,
okay.
Working at that weak side linebacker. So that's all he's doing. So he's doing all of the individual work. Everything is he's a linebacker for all intents and purposes now, with the way that the Frontiers are utilizing him, and he's running with the twos, and he's doing a really good job. He shows the fact that he can get into coverage. And I think maybe linebacker is a better fit for him too, because he was always a little over aggressive as a safety. That was one of the problems that everybody kind of had with him, was that that aggressiveness would cause some missed tackles on the back end. Whereas now, when you're more in the middle of it, you fire up there, you miss them, but Fred Warner's right there to clean it up and so on. So he's a guy that I think is going to have a shot of making the roster because of his ability to play on special teams, and he's showing that he can fill that role as the linebacker position.
That's awesome. And as far as just safety depth behind, I guess, Austin and Ward, how are guys like Jefferson doing? And who else is back there as far as safeties? I know you spoke a little bit about Hafunga, but do you feel like we have enough depth there as well in case some of these guys slow down during the season?
Yeah, Hufanga is really the one that's been running there. The other guy that's the one that to pay attention to is Jared Maiden. He's a guy that's really come along. He's the guy that's running as the backup at strong safety, I believe, for the most part. And Tony Jefferson's running with the threes, at least from what I've seen so far. So, Maiden's a guy that was an undrafted free agent last year out of Alabama, and he looked pretty good last year in training camp, and you're seeing him kind of doing that, kind of stepping up. Heck, on Tuesday, they even had him playing cornerback for quite a bit of that practice. He was the second team, one of the second team cornerbacks. So he's a guy that has a lot of versatility that can play a lot of different areas.
Awesome. And as far as like focusing back on Mosley, what are we seeing out of him? Is he looking like somebody? Because, the one thing that is definite about the NFC East is if you're a cornerback NFC West, if you're a cornerback in the NFC West, there's nowhere to hide, right? Each team has two solid receivers that could each be one wide receiver, one on their teams. So no matter who you line up against, is going to be somebody that could beat you if you're not, dotting your I's and crossing your T's. Do we feel like, because we all pretty much know Verrett could be that guy. We've seen it, all last season. Are you seeing flashes that Mosley could be that guy on a guy like maybe Lockett if Verrett's on Metcalf, on a guy like if Verrett's on D-Hop, AJ Green, or Robert Woods if Verrett's on Cooper Kupp? Like, are you seeing him be able to kind of take over that cornerback 2 spot, which technically is cornerback 1 based off of the receiver he's going to be facing?
Yeah, I think he's right now he's the second best guy on their team to do it. He's going to obviously Verrett's your top guy. So really what it's almost like is if you go back to 1994 when you had Deion Sanders on one side and then you had Eric Davis on the other side, right? And so you were able, they were able to kind of help Davis out a little bit more. They kind of rolled the coverages away from Sanders. They kind of put him over on an island. They let him do his thing, and they kind of rotated over and rolled the coverages over to Davis. That's something that the 49ers should be able to do if Verrett stays healthy throughout the season. So you're not going to see necessarily Mosley I don't think you'll see him get put on an island throughout the game. I think you'll see him get help from the secondary, and that's all because of the ability that Verrett has on the other side.
And I know we didn't talk about this before, Jack, but there's another cornerback that seems to be available in a trade, the kid from Jacksonville. What you're seeing from the secondary, obviously, a lot of people were talking about, the corner from Miami is available, requesting a trade. From what you're seeing right now, if you were GM of the 49ers and they're asking you, should we make a move? Are you seeing the corner, like, should the 49ers go out and trade some assets to get one of these corners in there? Or do you feel confident with the group that you're seeing right now?
I'd like to say yes, because I always want to get the best guys on the, go out and get everybody, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, when you look at the team, they don't have a lot of what are you going to trade to get that player? And right now they don't have first round picks for the next 3 years. Pretty much they have their second. So what are you gonna be able to give away to get this guy? Are you going to give up a second and hope that you can get a second for Garoppolo at some point? Because otherwise you're looking and not having to pick until hopefully in the around pick 100 if you have a good enough season here in 2021. So it's not a move that I'm really sure that I would make at this point. Seeing where they are depth wise, I think if Mosley can stay healthy and Verrett stays healthy, they're fine. And these rookies come along, they're fine. I understand we're looking at them and we're saying now they need to go out and get this guy because this guy is way better. But for what you're going to have to get for him, it's not a move that I think is necessarily something that they should be doing.
Swan Song brought up Merton Hanks had a great year that year. Merton Hanks by far has one of the best dances ever in 49er history. nearly broke his neck every single time he was showing off to the team, but definitely one of the best safeties that the 49ers have had. So